In the social media reaction genre, silly comments are considered especially heinous. At Dear Woke Christian, the dedicated content creators who investigate these horrible comments are members of an elite squad known as the Dusty Comments Unit. These are their stories.
Grace and peace, everybody. You saw the thumbnail, you saw the titles. You know what we're about to do. About 3 months ago, the Temu Shannon Sharp, Jamal Bryant, had Stacey Abrams on his podcast talking about politics and the church, what's going to happen in the election, all that kind of stuff like that. It was interesting because they talked about two topics that I think we really need to discuss: DEI and Black youth or young adults in the church. So I'm going to bring this link in real quick. Let's just talk about it. Let's go.
DEI law, because it was insufficient to say that you had education if we did not include those who were poor and had equity in terms of distribution. And so I would say that if you are, a U.S. senator from the Appalachian region who was able to graduate from public schools, you are a product of DEI.
Yes.
Because it was DEI that made it possible for you to get that education that you could have gotten if you lived in a wealthier part of.
So I just think it's interesting. Stacey Abrams is talking about equal access to everybody in Georgia or everybody in the educational system. I do think it's interesting how they're now trying to historically revise DEI and find DEI in history, which seems to be very interesting. I disagree with that 100%, but let's go.
The country took until 1990. So when we hear about attacks on DEI, they try to frame our attention around race alone. But if you are a veteran of any foreign war who lives in this country, you have benefited from DEI. You've also been, unfortunately, sometimes distanced from it because you didn't get access to the GI Bill.
Right.
But all of our interests should be in.
Okay. I'm going to we need to reevaluate that, because all we hear is people talking about DIE in the reference, in the framework, in the conversation of race. So for you to make it something outside of race, which is kind of interesting, Jamal Bryant, you're sitting right there with him, he makes it all about race. So it does seem odd that what you're saying here, Stacey, could very well be right. And I don't think it's a DEI issue. I think it's just being fair in what you promise veterans or whatever of that nature. So I'm not going to make it a DIE issue. But Jamal makes everything that, and you're sitting right there with him. I digress. Let's go.
The foundational values of diversity. That means all people. Equity. That means having fair shot at opportunity. And inclusion means having access to the American dream however you want to create it. The attacks on DEI are not because DEI doesn't work. It's because it worked too well. It's because the Voting Rights Act changed the nature of who got elected. And now Kamala Harris can stand for president and we have a competitive election. And that's because DEI works. If
DIE worked, people wouldn't be upset if I said they're DEI higher. If DIE worked, people wouldn't be upset about it and use it as a pejorative, because you'd be able to really big chest and say, no, it works. And this is a great thing. Thank you. That was a compliment. Because it doesn't work. Stacey, you were trying to play lyrical shell game, and it's just that's not happening.
We have companies that are making money because people of color have the bandwidth and the funding to buy their products. But we also see a difference in how this nation works because DEI works. And therefore, the people who are attacking it, the people who are quietly quitting it, the moral cowardice of the companies like Ford that are walking away from it, they are doing so not because DEI works, but because they don't like the fact that those who depended on DEI's failures are now facing the consequences of its success. And so I've created a series of organizations. They're known as the APR network. So I encourage.
That sounds really exciting. The problem is, if it worked, we wouldn't need it. It would be just the fabric of the world. You wouldn't need to call it DIE. People would just be like, oh yeah, this is how we roll. That's not how it works, because it doesn't work. I'm sorry. You can say it works till the cows come home, but it doesn't.
People go to aprnetwork.org, sign up. We can give you talking points on why DEI works.
Need them. Every preacher, go get them.
Please.
Go get them.
We can give you, we've got this amazing ad campaign because we know that those who want to destroy DEI they have a pretty simple system.
Yeah.
It's you demonize the language, make us pretend we don't like DEI, try to make us change our name.
Yeah.
You litigate, you sue Fearless Fund, you sue CBS for hiring writers, you sue to dismantle the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then you legislate. You pass laws like in Georgia and in Florida and in Texas where you say we can't tell the truth. You can ban books because they tell the history of our country. You do the work of convincing us that what we know to be true isn't true.
I have to challenge that. I have to push back on that. Jamal's not going to push back on that. I'm going to start with the banning of books. This argument is so threadbare. It's kind of embarrassing that we're still having this conversation this late in life, that we're still talking about this. Nobody's asking to ban books. They're asking to not indoctrinate children. And please, 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 please miss me with the idea that nobody would know anything about Harriet Tubman if we didn't do this. That's not what they're talking about. And I think Stacey Abrams knows that. Matter of fact, I know she knows that.
But we can fight against that infernal triangle with what I like to call our virtuous cycle. We need to legitimize our language, inoculate ourselves against attack, litigate and legislate ourselves. We can win, but we've got to know we're in a fight.
No, I love it. I think a lot of people know your personality, but don't know your profile. Being an attorney, you were just an attorney.
Yes.
I want you to talk about two things,
Yes,
because when we vote for the president, a lot of people don't understand the Supreme Court is at stake.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot on the line with the Supreme Court. In this coming presidential election in just a few weeks, the reason why we have to vote for the presidency, how does that impact the Supreme Court and the changing Supreme Court that's probably going to take place in the next 4 years?
So we need to understand that the three branches of government, we learned it in school, but the presidency determines who sits in the Supreme Court when you have the ability to make those appointments. What we saw happen to President Obama when Mitch McConnell was the Senate Majority Leader was that he forestalled the president from being able to make those appointments. That meant that when Trump became president, he had access to 3 seats. That is why women do not control their bodies. And irrespective of your belief about abortion, our belief about a woman's right to control her body, our belief about women's health care.
I'm always say this. It is so ironic that we have a Black woman who's never been married, who's never had children, advocating for Black women to destroy their children. That thing right there never ceases to just completely stop me in my tracks.
Amber Thurman died because of an abortion ban that said that doctors had to question if they could treat her. She did nothing wrong. She did nothing illegal.
Wow.
That's the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
The fact that we can't get guns out of our schools is the Supreme Court. And so if we want better for our children, better for our families, we've got to use the system we have. We can change the system maybe one day, but we can't wait for the system to change before we engage.
That's true.
When people say they're not into politics, I'm like, politics is into you, and it is a stalker.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Supreme Court, if you look at the ages of who's currently on that court,
Yes.
what happens next, the fact that we don't have a full effective Voting Rights Act anymore, the reason voter suppression happens at such a pace is because the Supreme Court struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
I would love for them to be able to really be pushed back on with this voting rights and voter suppression. I would love for them to just explain that. And what generally happens when they do that is they go into some live action role playing. Well, what abouts? And situations that are completely manageable. You know there's an election coming up in 2 years. Why in the world are you don't you have all your voting information taken care of right now? What's the problem? But then 2 days before the election, you want to say that you're being suppressed. There's another clip from here about why young adults don't attend church. And I think this is interesting. And so we're going to listen to it.
Why would we ever expect any candidate to gain your vote if they're not willing to ask for your help? And when a Black woman in particular makes that outreach, it should not be seen as a sign of desperation. It should be seen as a sign of respect and admiration.
Yes.
And that's definitely not what we're seeing from the other side.
I want to ask you, sitting on the porch as both a preacher's kid and as an advocate, help me to make sense of, this is the largest demographic this generation is of those who, two, one, don't go to church, and two, don't have confidence in democracy. What role does the church have to do? I read something the other day, I think in the Washington Post, that the Black church is no longer the cultural influence that it once was in days gone by for the election for younger Black people. What do you say or think that the Black church needs to do to level that?
I'm going to stop for a second. The Black church shouldn't be a thing. We don't need to add to the church. So the church needs to do its job. The church's job is not to be a cultural bellwether. The church actually stands counterculture. The church stands against the culture. It's a rock in the river against it versus going along with it. So therein is the first problem, is that Jamal, and I've said this before, he has no clue what the church is supposed to do. So I'm not going to put my hope and bet in that Stacey has a clue either. But let's hear what she has to say.
We have a generation that has access to more information instantaneously than any generation that's preceded it.
Yes.
We also have a generation that has faced more trauma, turmoil, and constant threat than previous generations, let's say post-Reconstruction, because you can never do a comparative.
Right. She wants me to believe that the generation today, those who were born after 2000, have more trauma, more pressure than those in the 60s? Those during the Vietnam War? Really? That's what, even when you hear her say it, it's almost like she knows she's selling wolf tickets. Crazy.
To slavery. But in this moment, these are young people who not only know what's happening, they know what's happening for everyone else. They know where it's happening and they know who is doing it. And they were told that when we achieved the outcomes of the Voting Rights Act, of the Civil Rights Act, that things should be better. They have not seen in their recent experience the kind of seismic shifts that you and I understand.
Yes.
I remember what happened, but I also grew up with parents who were in the struggle and with grandparents. My grandfather, who I did not know, my grandfather was born 25 years after the end of slavery. So my understanding of the connective tissue of history is different.
Yes.
But if you are a 22-year-old who has seen school shootings, natural disasters that are extreme and seem constant, you have seen the demise of democracy at the hands of a man who built his legacy on castigating and denigrating your community. You have seen
who is that you're talking about, Stacey? Because y'all didn't have any problem with Trump until he ran for president. Before then, he was your dude. So you're saying he built his legacy off of castigating? No, you all have changed his legacy into only castigating. I digress. Let's go.
The first generation since Reconstruction, your civil rights actually be stolen if you're a woman.
Yes.
There's a reason for doubt. And so into that space where the Black church can enter is to not chastise you for not being there, but give you a reason to come back. Become the center of community again by showing up to serve the problems that people see. And where you and I have such, I think, alignment is that there are too many churches who believe their job is to talk about, not be about. Meaning, I can't get involved in politics. This is not about being partisan. Churches are precluded from partisanship.
Right.
They are not precluded from politics because you and I both know there is nothing more political than the church. And therefore, the people who are...
I just want to stop right there because Jamal Bryant is partisan This is just so nose blind. I'm like, do you ever listen to what Jamal preaches or shares from his pulpit, Stacey? I don't think you do. Let's get done. Yeah, so I just wanted to look at those and hear Stacey's machinations about church as well as how DIE works, that it works too well, which seems preposterous because if it worked too well and companies were making money off of these DIE hires, why would they want to change it? Why would they walk it back if they were getting good quality employees? That would seem really counterintuitive to a company that wants to grow and increase market share and, of course, bring in income. If they found a formula to hire good employees, DIE, and they're making money and they're getting good employees, why would they walk it back? That doesn't even make sense. And then lastly, looking at the church's role and responsibility is not what they were talking about. The church's role is a gathering of believers to worship the true and the living God, sent out into the world to proclaim his truth. That's the purpose of the church. All this other stuff that y'all trying to get the church to do, some of it is, like feeding and helping those who are in need. Those are definitely within the purview, but some of this stuff, this political activism, is just getting you in deep water. So I want to know what you think about it. Let me know down in the comments. I appreciate you all watching to the end. I thank you so much for all of your support. And until next time, everybody, grace and peace.
Hit that like for deal with Christian. Yo, for deal with Christian. Smash that bell for DWC. Yo, smash it. Just smash it. Hit that like for deal with Christian. For deal with Christian. Smash that bell for DWC. Yo, smash it. Just smash it. Hit that like for deal with Christian.